Welcome, everyone. I'm Dr. Basil Considine. I am here from the ACU Online Writing Center, and today we are here for Intro to Grant Writing. This is a webinar that we have started offering at ACU through the requests of students such as yourselves. So if there are other webinars that you would like to see on our schedule, please write us in. You can type in something in the chat room. When you fill out our webinar RSVP form, you can enter something into the field, or you can just send us an email saying, "Hi, I'd love it if you offer something like this." We always want to make sure that what we are doing is both interesting and relevant to you. So please feel free to share your thoughts, your questions, and any requests. This is something that I've taught several times and that can go different ways. We've had people come in and they have a project that they're expecting to be doing in about a year, and that's a good lead time for applying for grants. We also have people who have projects that they're looking to continue and are wondering, how can I find support for this? And that's fine too. If you just joined us, please do introduce yourself in the chat room. Let us know what brings you here, what kinds of things you're interested in, what could we focus on in this webinar. While you're doing that, a couple preliminaries. We are here from the ACU Online Writing Center, which provides support to almost all of the online students at ACU. The only exception being the God Clause. The Graduate School of Theology has its own arrangements for things. So if you are coming to us with a paper draft, a question about an assignment, all of that is fine, including coming to a workshop such as this. And we work with people through a couple different pathways, through workshops, through asynchronous appointments where you send in your paper and we send you feedback within 24 hours, and also through real-time appointments if you have questions that you feel would best be answered or that you're most comfortable if you can do a back and forth. We do that by appointment. It's a special request thing because of the volume, but we do try and accommodate those as schedules permit. So today we are going to be primarily focusing on these three different types of related things: scholarships, fellowships, and grants. Now, you will sometimes see these overlapping with the same term used to refer to others, but in general, the terms are used to refer to different things. Scholarships, the term scholarship usually refers to financial gifts that do not have to be repaid, meaning they don't have a service obligation, it's not a loan, and usually there's some sort of eligibility requirement, like you have certain heritage or you have certain grades, or you meet certain milestones. An academic scholarship is usually one that's linked to your grades. It might also be called a merit scholarship. A needs-based scholarship is financial needs. Now, fellowships, the term sometimes is used synonymously with scholarships, but usually, but not always, there's an expectation of some sort of service commitment. For example, a lot of brick and mortar universities will have teaching fellowships where they will pay some portion of your tuition and in fees, and in return you have an obligation to teach a certain number of classes for the university. Or a research fellowship, where instead of teaching, you are doing research for a professor usually. Sometimes you'll have an independent research fellowship that you are supposed to do the research and you're supposed to report on it, but it's not being directly supervised, or it's not being done for the direct benefit of the faculty member, it's for your own project. Now, a more general term that you'll see used is the term grant, which is usually used to refer to a sum of money that's given by an organization for a specific purpose. Now, this could be a research grant. For example, I recently received a research grant to do work on an archive in France. So it said, okay, you can use this money to fly to France, to do this research and pay those expenses there, and that's all we're funding. And so these are the three general categories in practice. I think you'll agree with me, if an organization is willing to give you money, you don't really care what it's called, what they choose to call it, but it's helpful to sift through because some things Things may require conditions that you're not looking to do right now, and some may have conditions that you are willing and able to meet. Now let's further break down the grant category into 3 different general types. Need-based grants, generally financial aid. Project or programming grants, which are intended to fund activities. And research grants, where the goal is to generate new knowledge, usually expressed in some sort of publication or presentation. Now, I invite those of you who are with me today in the live session to type in the chat room if there is one of these that you are most interested right now. Now, the particulars for where we go in the main body will depend on the results that I see. So if you are very interested by talking about a certain type of these, please let me know. Otherwise, I've got some that I'm going to get started with here. So let's go ahead and look at 2 categories of research grants. Government funded, which could be federal, it could be state, it could be your city or town, and non-government funded, which is usually coming from nonprofits. Now, government funded research grants tend to have the most paperwork. On the other hand, they also are more likely to be multi-year awards. So if you're looking to do a multi-year intervention project in a school district, for example, that's the kind of thing where it's probably going to be coming from a government source. And so there's a little bit of upfront work, Eric, but on the other hand, then you've got 5 years of funding, and so you can be more relaxed as you do the rest of the work. I have here some examples of different grant databases and listing pages for work in the nursing field. And I also have one here for education leadership. Now I see we have some students in the EDD program here today. So I'm going to show you 2 related resources here. So I'm going to switch my sharing here. So it's going to go from my PowerPoint slides to my web browser. And do let me know if you are not seeing the web browser now. So I have here the NCER website pulled up. NCER is the National Center for Education Research. Now, NCER does a little bit of research of their own, internal, but most of what they do is they fund other entities to do research for them. You can see from this website here, this is a subset of the Institute of Education Sciences, which is itself, you can see from this URL here, ed.gov. It's a institute within the US Department of Education. Let's back up here to this page here. So here we see an example of a call for applications. All right, for a given fiscal year, they are not doing this particular thing. But they say, oh, for the following fiscal year, here is what they're doing. So this is for the fiscal year that's currently under process. This is for the next one, meaning the one that you want to be applying for. So we open this up and we see they've broken this down into different topics here. And we see that some of them are being funded in the current cycle, some of them aren't. Normally we go to education leadership, but you can see that one's not listed. So let's go ahead and let's look at improving education systems here. So we find here that we have a breakdown of different programs involving funding that if you were interested in this, you'd follow up through one of these links. Now the big zoo, as it were, is grants.gov. Pretty easy to remember, huh? Grants.gov. Now, this is what we call a clearinghouse website. It's got everything and its mother and its father and its little dog too in here. We're going to go to search grants, and I'm just going to show you some of the possibilities here. We'll see that if you look for, say, leadership, you get a lot coming up. 416 different opportunities. That's a lot. So let's narrow that down here. Let's put in higher education. And you'll see that we have things going down into a different number of areas. Now, some of this you might look at and say, well, okay, that's clearly not what I'm interested in. And this is a COVID-19 pandemic related emergency funding that you can apply for. So you want to be applying for that as a individual. This one is set aside for Native American tribe controlled colleges and universities. But you can see here that there's actually a set of related ones. Looks like 5 of them here, plus a more general one. So here's the general one. We've got historically Black colleges and universities, the specific strengthening institutions, tribal, minority serving, etc. So if you were working in the development office of one of these institutions, you wouldn't be applying for this. It's usually if you're in the Office of Sponsored Programs, might also be called the Office of Research and Sponsored Programs, RSP, or OSP, some common acronyms for that. Those are what we call institutional grants. Now, there are also sometimes grants that are available for individuals, and you can sort these out through these different and things for eligibility here. So you see, oh, okay, 114 for local governments, for-profit organizations, independent school districts. Let's look at those 14 for individuals. And we see we have a variety here under different headings. Now, this is leadership more broadly. This isn't what you'd use for like a fellowship to finish writing your dissertation properly. But perhaps you are working on STEM development, and you look at this and say, well, I've got my dissertation coming up in 1 or 2 years. Let's see what is available here. What might I potentially be able to get that if they funded that, I would be willing to make that my dissertation. And we see here that this is for STEM education related to Kirtland Air Force Base, New Mexico. Now, if you happen to be in New Mexico, you might say, oh, awesome, that's just an hour from my house. If you're not in New Mexico, probably this is a little bit out of field. But the point is to be looking early so that as your ideas become more specific, they can be shaped by what you know are available opportunities. Now, the NCER, I saw an excellent question. What does the NCER focus on? Let me jump back to that tab here. So the National Center for Education Research goes from early childhood to adult education. So it is very broad. It can include higher education, and let's just go ahead to this funding opportunities link here. So we see that they post these on a rolling basis, meaning as they come up, they add new ones. Let's go with, this one here. And let's go ahead and look at social and behavioral context for academic learning and see what they have here. We can bring up the whole request for applications. So in this case, the application, they tell us, is due June 11th. So probably a little bit close for applying in the current cycle. But again, if you're looking at, well, I'm expecting my dissertation to come up in a year or two, you see, okay, so normally they have all the stuff available in April. You submit your letter of intent June 11th. The letter of intent is basically saying, hi, I'm interested in doing this. Please put me on the list of people who are allowed to submit the full application. So even though this has its first deadline as June 11th, that's just a letter of intent. And that places you in the running to be able to submit this in August. And one of the things this stops people from rushing the whole thing at the last minute. It's kind of a gatekeeping thing. And so don't be thrown off by the fact that the first deadline is just 2 weeks away. That's just one letter. Now, let's look more at this particular one here. And we see that we have a hyperlinked table of contents here, so you can jump around this document pretty easily. And one of the things that you want to find out very quickly is this something that you can apply for as an organization or that you can apply for as an individual? And if so, what type of individual or organization? We're going to go ahead and jump down here to page 23. We find that this particular area, if you're applying for something that has anything to do with this stuff, social and behavioral context for academic learning, there's actually a dedicated person who will pick up the phone, who will answer emails. And that's very helpful. Just don't ask them the day that something's due. I have found that these folks, if you catch them a month ahead, pretty good. 3 months in advance, awesome. You can get lots of time and attention. If you are applying at the last minute, you'll find that there are probably a lot of other people doing that, and that's harder to get their time and attention. If you've ever wondered why I keep saying in feedback on your paper, need to make this more concise, well, here's one of those reasons, because for government applications, they tend to be very strict on these limits, and they say, oh, no more than 22 pages. If it gets longer, they will just cut the rest out. So that's a good reason to be looking at how to make things more concise. You see that for this thing, you can propose a project of up to 4 years, $2 million. Obviously, that's going to be a big project with multiple staff on it, so probably more than you want to do for a dissertation. I worked with one of my students on something like this for the California Department of Education at Azusa Pacific University, and they got a multi-million-dollar grant. It was amazing. They did a lot. They're still working on that, even though I think she got that grant awarded in 2016, where, yeah, it's year 5, so still working on that grant and still getting money from it and doing the research. So if you're trying to find out what capacity you have to be in to apply, search for eligibility first. So here we see the eligible applicants, and we see that this particular one, as usually the case with the multi-million ones, has to be an institution. Now, that does not mean that you can't apply for it, but you would be working through the research and sponsored programs, or the Office of Sponsored Programs, or the Office of Research on campus to do that. So I've written a number of these that have gone through to fund big projects. And although I worked on the application, officially it was the college that was applying, or the nonprofit that was applying. And that's fine. But again, you need to be talking with people sooner rather than later, because there's info that you need to get from particular individuals for that. All right, we are going to back up and move into the individual area. So back on my slides. So you see spencer.org here. So here, this is one of those names that you just end up seeing a lot of once you've done a lot of leadership research. You start noticing that they are credited in a lot of people's research because they fund all sorts of stuff. So we're coming near the end of their cycle for this year, but let's go ahead and look at their deadlines first, just to get an overview of, whoops, broken link there. Okay, let us go ahead and we are going to go to fellowships for scholars and journalists. So there are a couple different things here. So the Spencer Foundation is a group that is very interested in the scientific study of education, as opposed to, say, the philosophical, and how that information is disseminated to the public. That's why they have grants for scholars and grants for journalists. I'm just going to resize my window here so it should be a little bit easier to to read on the recording. Just a moment. Let me know if you can't read that. So we have here the NAED Spencer Dissertation Fellowship. Now this is a great one to consider if you are in our EDD program, because it has the potential to underwrite your dissertation research. And if you if I adjust my project this way back when you're at the project proposal stage, you can have a dissertation that would fall naturally into what they're looking for, what they're looking to fund, and what other organizations like them are looking to do. So you'll see here, it's a $27,500 award. And it's a fellowship, which, remember, usually comes with a service obligation. In this case, the service obligation is work on your dissertation. And they want things that are providing new and practical things that produce measurable results related to education. And I say it can be anywhere in the world. It's open to how exactly you're doing this. So whether you were working on something that was about training teachers in a school district, training people in an informal education system, in a extension school, or even staff training at a university, all those are potentially under the umbrella. Now, this particular program has its deadline in the fall. So what we'll be looking at are last year's guidelines. For the most part, things like this tend to stay the same. So if you are thinking, well, I would like to apply for that come the fall, look at what they have here and see what's up. And in this case, it looks like they have the guidelines for the new fellowship already online on this website here. You see that they award 35 fellowships a year, which is great. That's a high number. Most of the fellowships that I've won, they awarded 1 to 4 per year. So 35 per year really increases your chances. Good. You don't want it to be the only one that you apply for, but they're awarding a lot is good for you. And we see they have a list of the criteria that they are looking at when they evaluate that. So why is this important now? Well, usually this kind of award requires a letter of recommendation, and you want your letters to speak to these things, say, yes, this is important. Their work is high quality, it's doable in a time period, and probably something like, I think this will make a great journal article, or I think this would be very helpful for these people doing X. And it's specifically intended to support the writing as opposed to data collection. So think about that. There are fellowships out there for the data collection phase, but you want to go ahead and know what you can apply for now and what you can apply for the next stage. And you're always trying to anticipate these by a period of somewhere around half a year or so. Let's go ahead and look at the FAQs here, just because I think that'll answer a couple of things that I was otherwise speak to. So they say they need 2 letters of recommendation as well as a transcript. Okay, pretty simple. The letters of recommendation, and they even tell you, go ahead and talk about your proposal with the letter writers. So that tells me they want your letters to be specific, meaning, and they shouldn't be generic letters saying, oh, this person does great research. They should be about this particular project. And when you do that, you can send an outline or proposed text to your letter writers. That's fine. That's very normal. It does need to be your dissertation chair, and you need another faculty member. Other things here, they define education very broadly. And in this case, provided you're going to a school in the United States, then you should be good and eligible. All right, so that was one there. Let's look at another opportunity there. This one here, this is another link coming from the slides. This is AERA. AERA is the American Educational Research Association. it is another one of those very large umbrella organizations that oversees a lot of funding. Now, theirs comes, for this one here, from the National Science Foundation. And so the National Science Foundation gives AERA money that they then disperse in different research grants. And in this case, if you're a student in our ED program, you are one of these doctoral level scholars that they're referring to. Now, there are lots of ways that this could go. So let's look at the kinds of things that they want here. You can see, because they keep talking about quantitative data set, multiple large-scale data sources, that this is probably the kind of grant you'd want to go after if you're dealing with a lot of quantitative data. Now, I've had a couple students who I worked with at ACU who went and got huge sets of data from colleges on student retention and GPAs and all sorts of things like that that they've used, and students who pulled very large data sets from the US federal government, often but not always the Department of Education or the OSS, or BLS, the Bureau of Labor Statistics. So what exactly you're going to do with this? Well, something involving STEM, but you can also look at specific aspects. So I know that there are several students in the EDD program right now who are working on research involving achievement gaps with Hispanic students and with students of African heritage and low SES status and other classifications like that, to LGBTQ, for example, too. So we see that they specifically say, oh, yes, you can do that kind of stuff. So good so far. There's a description of the kind of data that you can work with on this grant. And we see that one of the requirements is that you share a lot of your stuff. So basically, the tools that you use, you need to publish. Doesn't need to be really cleaned up, but just available in case someone else wants to look at them. And they do 1-year and 2-year projects. It can be budgeted for a variety of things. They have webinars with recordings that you can watch. So if you're thinking, well, maybe I'll do that in another year or two, hey, you can watch the video and see what they recommend and do that preparation before it comes up again. And then we see the reporting requirement. Now, one of the ways that we know, although this is using NSF funding, that it's not an NSF grant, is that the reporting is fairly brief. This is only going to be 4 to 9 pages for the final report and a 3 to 6 progress report halfway through. That's not very much. You just start listing what you've done and you're practically done with that. So that is a relatively minor reporting requirement. And we see, okay, so this is normally due in March of every year. And they have the complete breakdown. If you're wondering why do we require your abstracts be of a certain length and certain maximum, well, it's because things like this do too. And if you look through this, you'll see that a lot of it, minus things like the budget and the current other funding stuff, most of this is actually the same kind of stuff that you're having to get together for your dissertation prospectus for the proposal, because we have, okay, how is this advancing the current state of knowledge, which is more or less the statement of purpose. List the theoretical or conceptual framework, brief review of the literature, okay, research questions and hypotheses, doing your methodology, which is basically a quick version of chapter 3 if you're writing a dissertation or a project, your plan for analyzing stuff. So this is all stuff that you would have to do anyway for your prospectus. So while it's not a straight copy and paste job, you will be able to use a lot of the information that you're writing anyway for applying for this particular grant. And I do recommend when you're making your short list of grants, take notes on how much work you think you'll have to do for them. Because you find there's a bunch that will take relatively little work and a couple that will take a lot. Do the ones that take a little work first, and then you see what time you have left available. I think we're going to go back to the slides for a moment. So based on the people in the group right now, we're probably going to stick with higher education for a little bit. But I wanted to show you this slide here in the deck, where we have links about K-12 education research. Now let's go to this Grant Launch website here. All right, so here we find that there are a lot of things listed here under higher education. Someone give me a state that they are working in that they might do their research in. Texas, Arizona, Louisiana, and so forth. Louisiana, okay. So let's see if anything comes up if we just search for Louisiana here. Now, we're just doing a general word search, so we'll probably have to narrow this down a little bit. This seems to be bringing up more than we need. So let's see how we can filter this. So let's change it so our geographic focus is on Louisiana. And let's see, we have grant interests. Let's go ahead and see here. Well, we have secondary education there. We have elementary education and college scholarship, other things. Let's not check this one just yet. Let's start with the filter for Louisiana. And let's go ahead and just search for foundation for now. See what comes up for that. So this is still pretty broad, but I'm going to bring up this one here because I remember I had a student who was working on nutrition in their public school district. And we'll see brief description. They're probably going to ask for a login there. It's free to sign up for this one, but we're not going to do that right now because we are going to go back to grants.gov. We're going to go here. We're going to search for Louisiana and education. So that brings up more than 1,000. Well, let's go ahead and change that to individual eligibility here. And let's see what they have available. Now, probably not going to go to Panama or to Azerbaijan right now. But we see, education in a corporate setting. Okay, we've got some people who've worked on things like that. We have, let's look at this STEM program here. And by the way, for the person who asked that question, if you could tell me what your dissertation topic is, that will just help me customize these results a little bit. So this particular one, this is for STEM Workplace Development Program. It can be applied for by a wide range here, which means it's generally very open-ended. Oh, this is taking us back to that New Mexico one. Not sure why that's showing up for Louisiana. Yes, in the chat. if you could tell me a little bit about your dissertation topic or expected dissertation topic, depending on where you are. Okay, so I see emotional intelligence. Let's take a look and see what comes up with research for that. Now, this is just one particular database, and it's just for federal government stuff. A lot of the emotional intelligence stuff is funded by nonprofits, but we see two results here. One for Nigeria, and then this other one that is for the People-to-People Reconciliation Fund. And so that they're requesting concept papers. So basically, the way this kind of thing works is they say, we would like people to propose stuff related to this topic. Say, here's what I will do if you fund me. I will write a paper on this thing. And then they look at it and say, okay, you, and you, here's the money, give us stuff. And you can see that it goes in a couple of rounds for the selection process before they arrive at the final thing. That is a more unusual thing, but you can guess from the size of the potential awards that you'll have people who are doing smaller scale things, whether it's like community leadership, up to we're flying people from around the country in to do this thing and we have a summit. So very open-ended. I will say that I've had pretty good success from finding past winners of grants, inviting them and say, hi, would you be willing to share a sample or just talk to me about this thing you got? And when you see a sample application, a lot of things are just easier because you see, oh, that's what they meant. That's the way that you can do it. This is important because it does not have a cost sharing or matching requirement, meaning the whole project would be funded under this award. Basically, you'll do it if you get the money, otherwise, nothing. Okay, so emotional intelligence. Let's do a very simple little internet search before we go look in a particular place. So I'm just searching for emotional intelligence and grant funding and saying, okay, what does that get us? Now, remember when we were at the IES website? Well, we see an example here listed from the IES website of research on emotional intelligence. Now, this was an award given in 2018 to this professor at Yale University. They were applying as part of a team with 3 other people. Depending on the level, you might see people listing their faculty colleagues. They might have their faculty chair be listed as either a PI or co-PI, being principal investigator, the people who are considered in charge. And we see there's a brief abstract. Here's what they were doing. They were evaluating the efficacy or effectiveness of a particular intervention. They were doing it in this environment with 72 early childhood programs that they recruit. So that's not a small amount of work. See, this is a $3.3 million project. So yeah, 5 years, 72 programs, that's going to be a lot of staff hours. And they're working with a huge number of staff and children. All right. You may recall that one of the earlier applications listed attaching the CVs of the principal investigators. Basically, the reason for that is to demonstrate, okay, between us, we have the skill set that's needed for that, as you'd expect for a multi-million-dollar grant. All right. I think that we probably should spend some of the rest of the time looking more on the fellowship level or individual research grant thing, because these are some big things which are definitely of interest if you are in a position to spend a few years on it. But if you're looking to graduate sooner rather than later, I think perhaps more of the fellowship thing might be more appropriate. Fellowship or a project-based grant. So let's go back to our search here and say, okay, so that funding didn't really work so well in that we learned about something past, but we haven't really found something to go find individual funding. Well, what about this here? It's Wharton School of Business at UPenn. And, well, it's password protected, which probably means it's available to current students there, or it's something that they're redoing. Let's back up just to check. See if we go here. So they do have a variety of awards, but some of these are pointed at, their faculty and their students. So, it's worth a shot. So let me show you one of my favorite databases. So Vanderbilt University has an excellent and set of databases that they maintain. We're going to go ahead and look at this one here. Grant funding resources for educational initiatives. Now we see that this is designed to tell you all you need to know. There's some stuff that are just, okay, you're at Vanderbilt, here's what you can do. Internal funding, yeah, that's money available just to Vanderbilt. But these databases, you can go look at those. Foundation grant and Grant Advisor Plus. This one is subscription, I believe. Research Professional, which I believe is free registration, as well as linking you to these other things here. So the Luce Foundation usually is dealing more with programs. Ford Foundation has some great fellowships. Lumina, I've had, I think, 2 students who got Lumina awards. And for people who are working in higher education leadership, the Kaufman Foundation here is something you should check out. Now, that page has changed. Let's go to Work With Us and Explore Grants. So whenever someone says, learn about how we fund, go ahead and read that. Probably because of where we are in the year right now, they don't have any posted. But you can always email them and ask to get on their list. So when they do solicit those, you come up first. Okay, so let's get a little bit more specific. So Education Leadership Dissertation Fellowship. If you talk with people in the field, if you look at the CVs of members of faculty, you'll start noticing some names come up, like the Woodrow Wilson Foundation, and does all sorts of education-related funding. And in this case, we have a nice landing page where we see, okay, travel and research grants. Now, again, we're past the application deadline for this year. The goal is know what's coming up, so when it comes up next, you will be prepared. So they have separate travel and research, which is what you'd be doing to be gathering stuff while you're still gathering data. And then the separate dissertation grants, which are, I've done all the research, I just need to analyze it and write it up. So let's look at this one here. This particular one requires that you have received a undergraduate award from them. So let's back up and say, okay, well, that's going to be the same thing probably. So these we're going to leave as, all right, that's already a different area. Now, higher education, and this year they're looks like they're just running the journalism one this year. Okay, that's fine. The teaching fellowships, not interested in those. I know we have at least 4 students in the EDD program right now whose work involves religious colleges and universities in the United States. So if this was you and you're looking at the writing portion of your dissertation, the Newcomb fellowships are absolutely something that you should look at and consider applying for. And you'll see that they've got a background. You can even look at who won these awards and go read their dissertations if you want. But I'd say if you think it looks interesting, look at the past dates and see, all right, so this is for the next cycle, they're going to be, the applications will be due in mid-November. And something around like November 15th is usually always that day. So, okay, so I could apply for this in the fall and for the coming academic year after that. Great. And I would say do sign up for their mailing list, because if things change, then you're getting a notification about that. Now let's go to IIE here. Now this happens to be set up for Fulbright alumni, but I can tell you a lot of my students have used this because it was stuff that was of interest to them, and they were eligible. So we see that there's some for particular things, like people who are going into the Foreign Service. We looked at the Spencer Dissertation Fellowship earlier. I've had some students apply for the Open Society Fellowship before. Usually working on some sort of equity thing involving schooling. Education policy, absolutely. This one here is a great award to pursue while you are, let's just find that. Just a moment. Looks like they redid their website since that link was added. So what I'm going to do is grab the name there. And search for that on their website. So there's a question in the chat about how common is it for doctoral students to apply for grant funding for the dissertation process? I don't know. We have a lot of students in our online doctoral programs, and a lot of it depends on the environment that you come from and what you're used to, because we have, and who's paying for it. So we have some students who are in districts where they are getting paid for the courses they're taking and by the unit. And so there's not a strong urgency, and we have some who are out of pocketing it and for which it is very much of interest to get external funding. I went to Boston University, which is a R1 research university, a high output research university. And part of the way that they ensured that we got this is that students were normally only funded for a certain number of years. And so if you were going to take more time on it, you had to get outside funding. And in my case, I went after and received a number of awards to support my going overseas to do research for my dissertation. Here, you'll see that the results are up here on the website, and you can learn about the things that they do as a fellow, which is part of it is training to do stuff, and part of it is just having time to write. So this is an unusually generous fellowship, in that it's for a 15-month period and not just 12. If the question was wondering at would you be a competitive applicant, or does it matter if the group that you are applying for funding has heard of your university, I'd say don't worry about either of those, because the committees, the people who are looking for through the applications, the people on the committees will have guidelines that they're given, and they will interpret them to the best of their ability. And you never know who else will be applying it in that. And sometimes you might get an award one year and the same exact application wouldn't get it the next, because as the committee has guidance of, we would like to privilege this thing, or we already admitted someone doing something similar last year and we want something different. I have worked with students at ACU and at other universities who applied for and got something the first time, and more often you play the numbers game where you apply for several and hopefully one comes through. If I had gotten a grant to go abroad earlier, I would have done my dissertation research probably a year before I did. But then when the grant came in, it answered all those questions of, okay, am I going abroad? Yes, I got the money to do it. I'm gone. So I hope that's helpful. A lot of these fellowships are competitive in the sense of you want to do your due diligence, meaning because there are all these other people applying, if you submit your application and it's filled with typos, you're like, oh, well, we don't need to read this one. Clearly they're not paying attention. But don't worry too much about who else is applying. Worry about what you are doing, how this would help you do the things that you are working on, and look for similar things. You don't want to be recreating the wheel and writing a whole new application every time. You want to find a concise list of things that are at least fairly similar and have a bit of overlap, so you can take your project, and while it might be tweaked according to the particular application and particular funding body, that is essentially the same project with minor variations being proposed for all of these in 1 year. And then you see what you get. Like any funding thing, it's good to be able to do something on less than you think you might have, because sometimes awards get trimmed. I'm going to be a Fulbright faculty fellow next year. All the Fulbrights that we're going to start in September now aren't, because they pushed back the start to January because of the COVID-19 and pandemic. So, things like that happen. But if the core project, if you believe in it, if it's work you want to do, it's a lot easier to convince other parties that it is something that they want to support. And you can work with people in our scholarships office to help find things that align with what you are looking to do. One of my colleagues is the director of fellowships and scholarships at Emory University. And one of the best parts of her job is when a student comes in and has a sit-down talk with her at the start of the year and says, hi, I'm so-and-so. I am interested in these things. Here's what I know about. Here's what I'm planning on doing it. Can you let me know if you see something that you think I should apply for? And some of these will have an institutional nomination where the institution puts you forward. And so them it's just matchmaking, and they help align you and point you in the right direction of, oh, here's this thing, go after it. And sometimes another set of eyes to give you input and instructions to help refine it. So ACU, I would say, I think ACU is classified as an R3 research institution. And so fairly busy. And we've had a fair number of students in our different programs get awards. If you're looking for mentors in the program that you can apply, that you can ask for advice on what to go after, the best thing is when you see an announcement of an award or go to the alumni magazine, look and see what's listed there. And if it's someone from ACU, usually they're more than willing to talk with other people from the university because we're all invested in the institution. I hope that's helpful. Just a couple little housekeeping things before we draw this to a close. And I should tell you that because these webinars, we try and customize them according to the people that are available, it is helpful to go look in our webinar archive to see a past offering because, for example, there was a session where we had a student who was doing research on stuff with leadership and religious institutions. And they came in and asked about that early. So we spent some time looking at that in more detail than we've done today. So it is strongly recommended to go look at those other recordings. Pretty much any proposal for a grant or application for fellowship will end up having these components. There's some sort of cover letter where you introduce who you are and what you're doing. It could be you write a paragraph, it could be up to 2 pages, depends on the opportunity. Some sort of summary of the project, usually a short version of letter of inquiry and a longer one later. You will enumerate your qualifications either as an organization or as an individual. And then you'll describe, well, why is this needed? What's the problem here? What needs to be solved or what needs to be fixed? What needs a solution here? And then a detailed description of how you propose to address that. The evaluation plan is basically, well, how do you know that it worked? Or how do you know what you ended up with? This is not so different than writing up your Chapter 3 research methods, which includes describing the analysis that you'll do. But this is being written with a layman in mind, with a general audience. So you don't want to use there's a lot of technical vocab. This is, average Joe off the street should be able to follow what you're proposing. There will almost always be some sort of financial plan or budget. Do include anything that you've gotten from other sources that might support it, which includes groups not charging you, giving what are called in-kind support or waived costs. And then often some sort of supplemental material. Could be letters of recommendation, could be your CV, could be a work sample, could be a letter from your chair saying, yes, that this student is ready. We are almost at the end of our time here, so let's just finish with a couple common errors. And I talked with my colleague at Emory when I was looking at this list, which I saw on another website. And yes, these happen all the time. People rush, they don't allow enough time to write, so they don't finish writing something that's needed to go there. They write about something that the instructions say not to do or don't ask for. They forget to edit or even spell check it. They don't spend the time to convince the readers that this is important and interesting. Or it looks like you haven't done your due diligence and gotten enough preliminary data or a lit review that shows this is something worth looking into. The flip side is a project that is too ambitious, where the people reading it say, well, this looks like a multi-year project and they've asked for 1 year of funding. And in which case you'd either need to clarify, oh, I'm looking for seed funding to start this out, or just funding for year 1 and then I'm going after something else. And then the other ones I think are fairly self-explanatory. Here's really good resource to read through. This is at University of North Carolina, Raleigh, I believe. And then just a couple last things. Sample applications are great. I've been privileged enough to win a couple awards in my life. I have answered many questions of people asking, what do I put on this or how do you do that? And I just give them the sample application, say, here's what I wrote. May it help you. And sometimes organization will post a sample application. It's not always a successful sample application, although the National Endowment for the Humanities usually only posts successful ones. Okay, we're going to have to stop there for reasons of time. I hope that this was useful to you. Feel free to suggest new webinars if there's one that you would like to see in the schedule for summer 2. We rotate through some of our regular ones, and we always try and offer some new ones. Last question that I see in the chat room. So everyone who registered for the webinar, who received an email that said, you're receiving this email because you RSVP'd for the webinar, then you will be getting a copy of the slide deck and a link to the recording. If you didn't RSVP to the webinar, but you would like to get a copy of that, just type your email address in the chat window before I close this out, and I will add you to the list. And with that, thank you very much. Have a great evening, everyone.